Welcome to the inaugural Black Educational and Economic Empowerment panel. So happy to have all of you here this afternoon. I'm Cheryl Brayboy. I'm Director of University Communications and Marketing and a former professor here of English and Communication. And I'm excited to be here with these distinguished guests during Inauguration Week. Today we're going to talk about things that matter. We're talking about Black education and Black empowerment, economic empowerment, and where we are, why we are here, and how we can get to the next level. So according to the Pew Research Center, these statistics are pretty stark. In 2021, Asian households had a median net worth of $320,000. White households had a net worth of $250,000. Hispanic households had a net worth of $48,000, and Black households had a net worth of $27,000. So the question is, why? Is it mindset? Is it internalized racism? Is it structural racism? Is it intergenerational legacy? Is it a lack of formal education? Or is it what W.E.B. Du Bois talked about in The Souls of Black Folk, that two-ness, that double consciousness, always seeing yourself through the eyes of another? There's some good news. The number of Black people earning master's degrees has actually doubled from 1996 to 2016. And we often hear that Black women are the most educated population in the United States. Is that true? Hopefully we will find out today. I'm so excited to be joined by our moderator this afternoon, Mr. Dedrick Russell. Dedrick is the executive producer for community content for WBTV. He has been at WBTV for 20 years, almost 21 years. He has covered everything from politics to education. He served as my co-host on QC at 3 for 3 years, which was so much fun. He is someone who cares deeply about the community. We see him here on our campus literally every week, covering something from the president's office to student life. And he is committed to community engagement. He's committed to education, and he's committed to making a difference. A quote I saw on Dedrick's biography is this: "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." And I believe here we at Johnson C. Smith University are a community that's engaged in discovering what we care about. And I think we can agree that one thing we care about is Black educational and economic empowerment. You should know that Dedrick earned a very prestigious award, 2005, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the Sigma Delta Chi Award, for a series he produced called The Troubled 10. This was a series that highlighted the 10 lowest performing schools in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. So while Dedrick has a bachelor's degree from Virginia State University in English and an MS in journalism from Syracuse University, at the core, Dedrick Russell is a humanitarian. And I'm so happy to introduce him to you this afternoon. Dedrick is our moderator today for this panel. Let's give it up for Dedrick Russell.
I tell you, if you need somebody to introduce you, call Dr. Brayboy. Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. I am so honored to be here on JCSU, HBCU. I have nothing but love for HBCUs. Always like to start, why don't you stand up and give yourselves a hand for showing up here today for this community. And while you're standing up, why don't we give it up for Dr. Valerie Kinlaw, who is the president of JCSU, the 15th president of JCSU. So, and also, we like to give honor where honor is due. Stephen Boyd, who is the chairman of the board. Where's Brother Boyd? Yes, thank you. I think you helped select Dr. Kinlaw, didn't you? Yes. We have a good conversation here today, and I am always in awe when I am in the midst of greatness. And we have some great panelists who are going to share their knowledge with us today on how we can move from point A to point B. And what I'm going to do is, I can't introduce you like Dr. Brayboy, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you introduce yourselves, because you know yourselves better than anybody else. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and they're going to give you their name, their education, what they do, and also I want you to add one takeaway that you want people to leave with after this conversation is over. Give me one of your takeaways that you want people to leave with after they leave this conversation. All right? So just briefly introduce yourself, your name, your education, what you do, what you're doing to make a difference, and then give me one takeaway that you want people to take away once they leave this conversation. I really want to start with ladies first.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me today. This is really exciting, and I am honored to be on this panel with these gentlemen. So thank you for that. My name is Robyn Hamilton. I serve as the CEO of our Urban League of Central Carolinas, and we represent traditionally the Charlotte region, but I'm convinced the entire state belongs to us. So we go across the state, y'all. So that being said, we focus in on a number of things that many of you may be familiar with. We focus on health, we focus on education, we look at housing, we look at policy and advocacy, and we really spend a tremendous amount of time around workforce development. And I'll talk more about why that is and how that just sort of came to be with us here. I think my greatest takeaway, and I'll just share it because it's just an aha for me over the past couple of months, is that things have shifted. Pay attention. That's kind of broad, but yeah, things have shifted. Pay attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Yes. And we'll just move on down.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Randolph. I'm the Executive Director and Co-founder of Carolina Youth Coalition, or CYC. We're a college access and persistence nonprofit here in Charlotte. We currently work with about 400 high school and college students through our college access program that helps students get to and through college with as little debt as possible. I'm a native of Lake City, Florida. I've been in Charlotte for about 7 years. Did my undergraduate studies at Cornell University. My graduate studies at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And it's an honor to be on this panel with our colleagues here. Look forward to the conversation.
And your takeaway?
My takeaway is we are in an era of urgency surrounding education.
Urgency. Thank you.
I forgot to tell the education part.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So, I did my undergraduate at St. Louis University. I was in the Army at the time, so did it on a military base, and then I did my graduate school at Queen's University at the McCall School of Business.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the hometown boy here, Melvin. I am the director of the Master of Social Work program here at Johnson C. Smith. Also an associate professor within the program. So social work is what I do out in the community. Being a Falcon administrator, a lot of my work is in the community. The research that I do is engaging CBOs. I see some of my friends in the audience that I do a lot of work with here. My education, I got my undergraduate from North Carolina A&T, so I can ride. I I got my master in social work from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and my doctorate in human development and family studies from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. My takeaway for this audience, I'm just gonna call it what it is. You need to engage in this political process. This next election is gonna be generational changing for not your children, but your children's children. So get involved.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. James E. Ford, the founding executive director of the Center for Racial Equity in Education. We like to go by CREED, based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're a North Carolina-based, North Carolina-focused education nonprofit that seeks to eliminate racism and the disparities of race out of the education system from early childhood all the way to post-secondary. We also lead an initiative called the NC10, which is it's a collaborative amongst the 10 fully accredited HBCUs in North Carolina. I'm not sure all of us know we have the most four-year HBCUs of any state, so we think that's a great asset. My education, I'm a native of Illinois, so I did my undergraduate work at Illinois State University. I got my Master's of Arts in Teaching from Rockford University. I was a K-12 educator in Charlotte, Mecklenburg Schools for a number of years, and I most recently got my PH.D. from UNC Charlotte. My takeaway would be that HBCUs is not just a federal designation, it's not just a history. HBCUs are the schools of the future.
I must add that 10 years ago, Dr. Ford was North Carolina Teacher of the Year, 10 years ago. All right, we're going to get into this conversation. The first question, what do you see as the most significant challenge the Black community is facing in terms of educational and economic opportunities? What do you see as the most significant challenge or challenges the Black community is facing in terms of educational and economic opportunities? And we're going to start with Ms. Hamilton.
You got a smaller question you can start with? So, I mean, that's broad. So, again, these are, we're really like, I think the greatest challenge is apathy. I think we're just disconnected. And that scares me because that aligns with what's going to happen in this political race, because that is going to define so much that will happen over the next 20 years. That being said, we have 3 people running this year in our presidential elections, and this person is also running in our local elections, and so we'll likely have Trump as a candidate, Biden, and our couch. So it is the couch that seems to be really consuming, and it's a little scary that we're not taking some things a little bit seriously. The opportunity here for folks of my generation, and when you talk to pollsters, our generation as well, my parents fought for this right, and my parents' parents fought for this right, so I'm going to the polls. So, we make up 30% of show enough voters. The next highest percentage is that 18 to 25-year-old. You have the greatest opportunity for change. I am absolutely convinced, without a hands down, HBCUs are the factor in what would happen in November, period. If we did nothing else but pumped money into that and making sure that they voted and they engaged and they were heard. The challenge that we're having around the conversation around education and around economic development and things of that sort is the population tends to be disconnected from the conversation because they don't believe government has worked for them. You know what I'm saying? So, how we're talking to that demographic, how we're treating our HBCU students is not even remotely the same that we were treated, that we can't associate and assume that their beliefs, thoughts, systems, and what they'll do will follow what's happened in the past. Just to kind of give you a sense of how we're recognizing the shift of thought. We as a community have typically, followed our church beliefs, right? Good old, Christian Baptist, you know, that's what we did, that's what the civil rights movement, so we traditionally followed that vein. An issue that has popped up that has surprised voters has been the issue of abortion. That is the biggest motivator they're finding out in the polls, and that people will vote more than any other issue, and that's abortion right. And that's a shift. Man, I say I believe that's a shift from African American beliefs from 30, 40 years ago, right? So we know we're talking to a different mindset, and so those old folks of us kind of talking, some of us haven't necessarily made that shift in terms of how we do it. We're saying you should value, and why we're saying you should vote and what you should vote for. So I think that there's an education that has to happen also for folks that are now talking at our most powerful demographic that is emerging, that will actually have the impact on empowerment and education and economic development. That being said, interesting enough, when we were looking at the state of Ohio, it was on the ballot as they call it, the number one, it was issue number one. This has been about 4 months ago. Abortion was the number one issue on the ballot, and there was a vote that was being taken place. 87% of that issue was carried by Black males. So, right, we're seeing things shift that we didn't pay attention to before. So everything we thought about, the way people vote and the way people think is not the same. So we have to think about it differently. So there's an education that has to happen on our part as well.
Thank you. And we're all family, so when I throw out a question, if you feel led to push that button and talk, we're just at the kitchen table, and you can just go ahead and jump in. If you want to jump in, Dr.
I do.
Jump in.
I'm itching to get in, right? So just the point of, so I agree with policy and political reversion is one of the biggest issues that we have to think about. If you look at the reversions that's been happening, DEI, book banning, right? You look at what happened in Chapel Hill with affirmative action. That's bleeding over into the private sector, right? Like, so all of those things that we held as what we thought were rights and a part of how we knew and how we grew up, abortion, right? How we knew and how we grew up, those things are being attacked aggressively, right? And it's already happening. We don't have to wait until November. Those things are already happening. And if you don't think abortion is everybody's issue and it's not a Black economic issue, then you need to think again, right? Because disproportionately Black and brown people are affected by what happened with the Hobbs system, right? So we have to be in the fight. This is something that we got to really take serious.
Can I just add on to that really quickly? I'm going to agree. When you ask the question, is the biggest issue with the Black community in education, I think it's that people don't want you to have it. They don't want us to have it. And they never have, and that hasn't changed. I think we thought that some of the victories of the past would be longer lasting. What we're finding out, as referenced by the good brother here, is that what was introduced as CRT, and unless you study CRT, most people don't know what critical race theory is. What then became pejorative called woke, and now it's DEI and affirmative action. I think it's going to cascade into looking at HBCUs and saying, well, why do we need Black colleges? I can almost see it happening. Their sense of emancipation when we secured the rights to public education, and when many of these HBCUs had their inception, there has been a backlash because there's a correlation between educational attainment in most cases and your earning potential. It's been the one institution that, if we've taken a hold of it, and our folks knew that, allowed us to mobilize, to have a chance to move up in society. And where inequality exists, it sucks for people who are the losers on losing of inequality. But for the winners, you don't have a problem with inequality, right? You're like, okay, that makes sense. And so in order to keep some folks in a position of subordinates, you have to strike at the core of the one thing that allows them to lift themselves up, and that's education. So that is most definitely on the ballot. That's something we should pay attention to. I also want to talk a little bit, you talked about abortion. Since it's a family conversation, we're going to talk honestly. The other issue that's used to drive a wedge in our community is the LGBTQ issue. See how quiet it got? Because for any number of reasons, we have a various set of beliefs around that. And a lot of times what we know, what we don't know, what we don't understand leads us to just overall, cancel stuff out. And I'm of the persuasion you can feel however you want to feel about it, right? You cannot undermine people's human rights. And that's really the issue. Nobody's trying to persuade nobody to believe anything. You can't. I think we could all agree in the fundamental dignity that every person has to live and to have their being. And so that issue, when they poll it, that's where the black community starts to split. And I've lived long enough to see folks vote for certain candidates based on that one singular issue, and then witness 8 years of calamity as a result of that. So we gotta be able to look at the full slate and say, all right, maybe I don't understand it. I know something we don't understand. So what is this? We don't understand all that, I get that. But at the end of the day, I know that will be leveraged by opposition to get us to forfeit many other gains that we made in the last 50 to 100 years.
I'll pivot a little bit. I think the thing that keeps me up at night related to our work and the young people that we work with will be the state of our teacher workforce. Our school district this year started with 500 teacher vacancies. Many of our teachers are older, they're starting to retire, and we do not have a pipeline of new teachers who are coming into the profession. I believe, and I think the research will bear out, that having a quality, competent, phenomenal teacher is one of the most transformative things for our students at any part of their development. It can also be one of the most disruptive things when they do not have that. And so I know a number of our students are in classrooms being taught for semesters by part-time teachers, long-term subs. I actually read that CMS is going to run out of money eventually to continue to pay our long-term substitutes. So not only do we not have full-time certified teachers, but we're going to struggle to find and pay for substitutes. And so I'm concerned about the long-term impacts of that, not only on student outcomes and their educational attainment. I think one of the things that might be that's emblematic of that is our view towards teachers and the way that teachers have been demonized, victimized, particularly since the pandemic. We put a lot of weight on our teachers, we put a lot of blame on our teachers. So I think that that's put us in a place where, frankly, if I'm a young person, if I'm a 16-year-old 11th grader, do I want to become a teacher? Is that a thing that young people aspire to do based on the messages they get about our educators in society and in our community? So I think we have a responsibility to elevate and restore the respect that our teachers and educators deserve.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because we're talking about Black educational and economic empowerment. We just reported that about 10,000 North Carolina teachers left the classroom in 2023. And that was the highest number of teachers who have left the educational system in the past 2 decades. More than 10,000 teachers throughout the state of North Carolina said, bye-bye, little Johnny, bye-bye, Susie, I'm out of here. I'm not teaching anymore. I'm done with it. I'm throwing in the towel. 10,000 teachers throughout the state of North Carolina. So talk to me, with 10,000 teachers leaving the district at once, leaving the state in 1 year, what does that mean when we talk about educational and economic empowerment when we have 10,000 teachers who just throw in the towel? Jump in.
All right, so I was on the State Board of Education last year when those numbers were in, not those numbers, but when we started to see an uptick. And the person who was in charge of public instruction dismissed it. So it was a blip on the radar, nothing to be worried about. So pretty much since COVID, you can kind of see, that there was going to be a shift. And again, I was a classroom teacher, but I think there's a line now of demarcation between those who taught before COVID and and those who taught after. That was a different year for teachers to teach on that, to pivot to teaching online, and then we provide all these other services, be treated as essential workers, but not be respected as essential. And then you add in all these other layers of attacks and politicization around memory laws, talking about what you can and cannot teach about Black history in the classroom. Laws that force teachers to divulge their curricula and their materials and place it public scrutiny of parents. Who would want to stay in a profession like that? Even if you love it, like, let's just be honest, at some point in time, you know, folks are not martyrs. But again, I think it goes back to the other issue I talked about, which is a lot of the schools that are affluent, schools that have a high socioeconomic mobility, for the most part, they're going to be okay. But it's not just that teachers are leaving, it's also that they're taking money. They have not restored funding that has been owed to the schools in our state to the tune of about $3 billion. And on top of that, they're taking money out of those schools and sending them to private schools via vouchers that they're calling opportunity scholarships. So it's a whole soup, a whole mix of situations that when you look at it, end up disadvantaging certain demographics, and you can guess what they look like because they look like you. And so to me, I just view it all as part of it, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I can anchor it in history, right? But it's all part of a movement to create the necessary inequality that produces a really cheap labor force who cannot make a livable wage, but that we can hire to do the things that we don't want nobody else to do, and continues to concentrate all the benefits of a very wealthy, affluent elite. And so I think that's dangerous for all of us when we don't necessarily know that train is on the tracks and it's moving fast.
So I totally agree with that. I mean, any of us, all of us that experienced COVID, if you had one Zoom call, you had too many, right, during that time period. And so imagine where these teachers were with regards to that. But I want to expand this window because the teachers did struggle through that period. But think about the students, right? So the end user, think about where that left them. One of the things that in social work, one of the focuses is McKinney-Vento families. Anybody familiar with McKinney-Vento families?
Yes.
Right. So you know that legally, the school system has to provide for those that are identified as unhoused, right? And so during COVID, imagine how many people we lost, right? How many students we lost in the system. Where are they? There was no tracking system, right? So I think the entire system is strained, right? And has been strained, and we don't know how to recover from this. This is something that's bigger than just CMS. This is a national issue, I think, that we don't talk about. We don't give it enough attention. And so I think this leads into another issue of the digital divide, right? The digital divide was a huge issue through COVID. COVID pulled the scab off of that issue and showed how broad that issue really was. One of the things that I think we really need to focus on since COVID is not just the structural component of the digital divide, but the functional component. What we saw was even when we gave devices to parents and students, right, many of them did not know how to navigate, right? So it was a functional issue, right? And so I think there's a whole lot that's going on that we got to be engaged in, and there's some things that we can do, I think, as individuals.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 10,000 teachers leaving. So the next question. What are some, I know you guys have been all over the place, what are some examples of some successful initiatives or programs that have made a positive impact on Black educational and economic outcomes? What are some examples of successful initiatives or programs that have fact-based, evidence-based, made a positive impact on Black educational and economic outcomes? Who wants to take that?
Well, I'm not the educator, but I'll tell you what I know. Well, let me tell you where we're headed, and you can tell me what's been working. So, the Urban League has finally signed an MOU with CMS. And specifically what we've aspired to do and been working on in the last year is we are specifically going to go after this learning loss. I am completely blown away with absenteeism in the schools. I am blown away with, teachers cannot possibly make up for the loss through the course of the day, take care of every child, the way every child that needs to be taken care of and brought along. And then we send them home, and mom's got 2 jobs, right? I mean, she got to cook, clean, get clothes in the tub. You know, I mean, it's just not possible. So what the Urban League has done is we have structured a program with learning loss where we are actually going to partner with Johnson C. Smith University and their students, and what we're asking them to do is we are going to pay tutors to go into the school during the day. This is not online. We want to pay students to go into the school during the day and be responsible for pulling out. You have your 4 kids, right, for a couple hours a day, and you're going to go in and help them, help these teachers with that gap. I tell people, I was like, this is an economics issue, which is why it's not difficult for me to get people to pay attention to it, right? We're talking about something, they said something like $50 billion impact to our economy, to our GDP in the next, I think, 15 years. This is a significant issue. So we're trying to figure out how we can get some students, hello, you're here in the room, we're working on that right now, that are willing to go into the schools a couple times a week and work with the students to get them caught up. So we're working through getting things solidified with JCSU. We're super excited about it, ready to launch it. I'm going to do it in the fall, and it does come with some evidence-based practices, and Stanford University is doing a lot of the back-end work on some of that information, but there's 10,000 tutoring hours that happen every week in Greensboro. So we know that there's going to be, some positive impact out of that. But again, that's still being developed and funded and all those sort of things. So we're hoping to be able to announce that partnership with JCSU, CMS, and Urban League before the fall.
There are a number of research-based early intervention programs and programs intended at the higher education level to identify students who are at risk of dropping out once they enroll in college. That disproportionately affects Black and brown students, especially first-generation college students. Unfortunately, in the anti-DEI state that we're in now, a lot of those programs are being rolled back on a lot of campuses that our Black students are attending. And so while they have been successful, I don't know if the students I send to college or the students that are going to college will be able to benefit from those. I will say something that's worked, and this I think ties into the civic responsibility piece. The biggest barrier for a lot of students that we work with as far as higher education attainment is financial, right? And the policy I'm going to mention has been around since the 70s, I believe, but the Pell Grant this year increased about $500 per student, which was a big win at the federal level. However, the FAFSA rollout has been completely a debacle, to say it lightly. And so that's not only going to impact college enrollment, but I think particularly our colleges who depend on that funding from students who are Pell Grant eligible. There's I think a potential crisis looming there. So as citizens, please reach out to your U.S. representatives, your senators, and please let them know your dissatisfaction with that so that we don't have that again, because I don't think we can afford to have another year where students are not able to complete the FAFSA and get access to that federal funding they need to make higher education attainment possible.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing to add, and this is not necessarily a program that are evidence-based, but I think we have to do a better job of investing in our local CDOs that are doing this work. Oftentimes, what I've noticed with the organizations that I work with, many of them are doing the tutoring and a number of different efforts to improve academic outcomes, but they don't have the expertise, right, to be able to measure what they do. And so I think this is where collaboration can happen between the institutions, right, and many of these CBOs. And the reason that is so important, and I see Mr. Abdullah and I saw Mr. Earl earlier that's doing this work in the community, they have a granular level and granular level relationship with these families. And in order to make improvement, you gotta know these families intimately, right? You gotta know what they need, because it's more than just teaching them how to read, if I've learned nothing else. And so working with these CBOs at the local level, I think, is a way that we can make huge impact.
Thank you. Talk to me about policies or reforms you believe are necessary to create a more equitable and inclusive economic landscape for the Black community. Do we need more policies, reforms to make this happen sooner rather than later?
Yeah, like yesterday. For a lot of us, we don't live in the space of policy because we don't call it that. The work we do is education policy. I never knew what policy was. I knew we'd sit in the teacher's lounge and commiserate about who chose to do this test on this day. I wanted to know who made the rules. I didn't realize I was engaged in education policy. That's what I was doing. And policy is important because programs are a necessary component of that. But we can't program our way out of really structural problems. We need a change in policy. I'm going to talk about HBCUs. Where's the money at? HBCUs, private and public, have been perpetually underfunded. And that has been, I think, a result of both systemic racism and systemic racism. I don't know what the other one was I was thinking, but it's systemic racism. Not only have our states, we talk about our public HBCUs, perpetually and deliberately underfunded these schools, which creates a lack of infrastructure and improvements and development. It pushes a lot of these schools into repair and renovation all the time. It disallows them to be able to compete, to build up their endowments, which doesn't allow them to provide scholarships, right? We're talking about something that trickles into every aspect of what these institutions do and have been doing with less. But the problem is when you're resilient, some folks get the message that, oh, they don't need as much. And I think that that's a problem. And I think an injection into the private institutions as well, because cities like Charlotte have benefited from the knowledge capital that has been produced by Johnson C. Smith. Folks who live in this neighborhood in Bitterville who have contributed to the tax base weren't able to send their kids to other schools, send them to Johnson C. Smith. And so you may say it's a private institution, but they're due knowledge as well. And so at the end of the day, from a higher ed standpoint, there has to be, we can call it reparations if you want to call it reinvestment or whatever. There has to be an injection of generational capital into these institutions in order for them to provide the sort of premier education that they already have been doing at the level that they're capable of doing.
Thank you.
I'm going to say this, because we talk at camp talk. I've been in Charlotte for close to 25 years. I've seen a lot of initiatives, a lot of programs, and a lot of things that have come through. I've also seen Charlotte firsthand, first knowledge, pull off stuff that people said we couldn't pull off. So I was on the Democratic National Convention team when they were here, and I sat in a room with white, black, blue, purple, Republicans, Democrats, and they were like, if nothing else, we're gonna pull off this political convention. The amount of willpower that was in that room was phenomenal. The amount of willpower and money that was able to come around quickly behind the mayor's initiative was incredible. I'm saying that to you all to say, the things that we're talking about are not impossible, right? It's not difficult for us to figure out this funding issue for our HBCUs. Robert Johnson had a great idea, and I don't know whatever happened to it, where he was like, you think about all the just professional athletes, just that. If they each gave $1 million one time, like we come back, like to tap you every year, $1 million one time, put it in a fund, the money that they would make off that fund would literally pay for every seat at every HBCU in the United States. Well, this is not rocket science. I don't know why we can't seem to get ourselves together. I will say this, it is just my belief that you know, we are at a time where you're seeing institutional tear down, right? You're seeing things that have progressed over the last 70 years being systematically taken down by a plan. Now, if you think about it, in 1860, which is actually when the conversation began to start, really around civil rights, from 1860 to 1964, when we actually signed, right, the Voting Rights Act, there was a plan, and we were systematically trying to, we knew what we were moving toward. Well, since 1964, they know systematically what they're trying to move toward. You get what I'm saying? And what you saw that came out of what was happening in like 1860 and 1865, 1893, institutions like, you know the word institutions like the NAACP and the Urban League came as a result of those things. We began to have an institutional mindset of how we were going to attack an issue. So that means we collectively came together, right, and put together a plan or progress, right? So the whole civil rights movement. I'm saying that to say we have gotten away from that institutional, how are we going to come up with a plan to address the ills and the challenges that we have as a society. And so that's the reason I never refer to the Urban League as a community-based organization anymore. I was like, we're an institution, right? So how do we come together as an institution and solve some of these things, right? We got to stop looking elsewhere, out where government, it's not, help ain't coming. You know, and I'm like, that's the reason I'm just like, this program is an issue. We got to figure out how to do this together. And I don't know how to mobilize that, but I'm just telling you, it's help ain't coming.
You know, I would say reform that needs to happen is we have to look at housing. We have to look at housing, and we have to look at the impact of gentrification on housing when we talk about educational and economic empowerment in the Black community. Right now, if you look at even what's happening around JCSU just 10 years ago, right? The landscape has totally changed. And we know that wealth is rooted in home ownership and owning property. So we have to figure out what this is. I don't know what this looks like. It's a very complex issue. But as you see folks being dislocated and fewer housing units, or we talk about inclusionary, right? But is that really happening? So I think that's another issue that we really need to tackle.
Can I throw one more in real quick? Student loan forgiveness. Because Black borrowers are exponentially more likely to take on student loan debt than their white counterparts, which this allows you to do things like qualify for home ownership because your debt to income ratio is ridiculous. So I just want to throw that out there.
Do you know the average loan amount was $10,000? They did a study. There was a student loan debt for African American students. The average loan amount was $10,000, and it grew to like 60, crazy numbers, and that's what threw us out of debt. $10,000 was usually the starting number, and it just grew. $10,000 is what has affected us.
Those clearly weren't my numbers.
I hear you, doctor. I hear you,
It
doctor.
started at 10.
Listen, we're going to open it up for questions from you guys, so get ready. I'm going to come by, and if you have a question, just raise your hand. But I wanted just to piggyback on what you were saying about we can do what we want to do. So I guess this is a two-part question. Last year, CMS passed the highest bond referendum ever in the state of North Carolina, $2.5 billion. Right? So we got that done, right? We got that done. But I'm saying if we can say yes to $2.5 billion, why can't we say yes and have initiatives and programs just like that when it comes to moving the needle, when it comes to education and economic empowerment? And then how do you fight fatigue? We've been fighting this fight for years. I've been here 20 years. What we were talking about now, we were talking about 20 years ago. So how do we fight the fatigue? And how is it that when it comes to a bond from $2.5 billion done, but when it comes to closing the achievement gap, digital divide, economic empowerment, slow like a turtle? Who wants to jump in? And I'm coming out to y'all. Who wants to jump in? Oh,
All I can say is what I tell my students all the time: we can't afford to give up, right? You just can't. I mean, you think euphorically about it, right? Like this is what it can be and what it should be. But at the end of the day, I resided that on the fact that I won't see it, right? My kids may not see it, but hopefully their kids will see it, right? And so I think just you have to have that mindset to stay in the fight. I don't know how we get there. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, we have to narrow our silos. We got a lot of folks doing the same things and wasting resources. I mean, it's a whole lot of reasons, but yeah.
But Mr. Randall, does that resonate to young people if we hear that? I'm not gonna say it in my lifetime, or, I mean, does that motivate them, or do they say, man, if you ain't gonna see it, Grandpa, then, you know, I ain't gonna see it. Talk to me about that.
No, I think there has to be some, they want instant gratification to some extent. And so I think maybe your point is, how do we involve young people in advocating for the policies and the programs that they will benefit from and see, whether that's politically, whether that's in our education system. How do we incorporate that youth voice to make sure that they're involved in that process? I think on the fatigue standpoint, I don't have an answer either. I think it's, my grandma used to say, like, keep on keeping on. I got here in 2017, and that was just after the Leading on Opportunity Task Force report was released and the recommendations were made. I feel like about 2020, people were kind of like tired of talking about economic mobility and 50 out of 50. And now if you go into a meeting 7 years later, and you start talking about 50 out of 50, it's like, oh, here we go again, we're still here. So I think you're always gonna have that. I think when you get big flashy statistics and moments like that, a lot of folks who maybe are joining in the work when it's popular, when it's the shiny thing, maybe are not used to having the resilience it takes to take that from a moment to a movement. And so I think for the folks who are on the ground doing the work, who have been doing the work before the light was shown on it, I think unfortunately the burden kind of falls to them to continue shedding a light on and continue doing that work even when it's not popular.
And the power of what happens in the city, it's fairly centered. I mean, we kind of know where the decision makers are and folks that can really move an issue in this town. And so, it's how do you get them to move on? And I think we've had some really, really strong leaders in our community that have wanted to change and move the education piece. I have just found that being in Charlotte, that it's sort of like wherever the smoke is, that's where, we get distracted. We're like, oh, we gotta go over here and we have to address this, right? One of the biggest issues started right here at JCSU. I don't know if y'all remember back when who was that was the basketball team? Bob Johnson. Bob Johnson. There was a dinner at JCSU. He made a comment during the dinner that Charlotte was incestuous and did business with black businesses. So the next day, Charlotte clutched its pearls because it got picked up by NPR Newswire into the Charlotte Minority Economic Development Initiative. I actually wrote the initiative, but my point is that those things don't happen sometimes until you see, right, things get a little crazy. This was before Leading on Opportunity. This is before all of that. So sometimes it unfortunately takes a big, scenario for us to respond.
Who has a question? I will hold the mic because I've noticed that when you take the mic, you go on and on and on.
That's right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Washington. I am the Economic Development Chair for the Black Political Caucus. So this was a very riveting discussion, and I thank our esteemed panel for their comments here. I can probably go through so many deals when we talk about economics. I'm DEI, just so many different topics in the CMS bond. But one thing I want to throw out there, if you pay 77 1 mile, it's going to cost you $2 million. Do 35 miles, I have Steph Curry's contract. So just put that in perspective here when we're talking about, where things land on the economic landscape. One thing that I think will really create great economic mobility for the Black community is our consumerism is off. We have so many options. You go, literally, you pick a jacket, you go online, you got 30,000. Now, pricing is going to win for you, ultimately, more times than not. But the reinvestment back into the Black community with your own money, it doesn't stop when you buy soap from this store that's a Black, owner. That person in turn takes that $3 that you paid for that soap, pays for the materials, pays for the people that work there, and then ultimately that money cycle repeats. That's one thing. The second thing is within our community.
Do you have a question?
I'm kind of in the question, but let me just. Okay, got it. Fair enough. That's it. Within our own community, when we talk about our reinvestment in our homes, I also think that the institution of marriage is slightly drifting, where we're not bringing in two incomes into a household to help us benefit. So I'll just leave that with a statement. Again, I don't really have a question. I really respect your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question on this side? Okay. Joe. Let me go on this side. I'm gonna be a ping pong.
Yeah, while you're going to the next person, I will let you know that you've noticed this past year, the Urban League has embarked on fatherhood initiative. We started out with non-custodial fathers that we were seeing from the court system. And now it's just evolved into a real conversation about fathers and fatherhood. And that probably is the linchpin to help us deal with violence and everything else. So to your point, it is clear we have to get back to this conversation about family.
Your question?
Yes, Dr. Alexandra Arrington, happy to be here, thankful for each of you all's comments. I am in a dual capacity here. I'm an adjunct faculty member here as well as the executive director of a nonprofit called the Money Magnets Club that focuses on entrepreneurship and financial literacy for elementary school students. So my question is, you all have probably seen the statistic now, $300,000 is the living wage now in Charlotte for a family of four. Where does entrepreneurship play? I don't know a person in my social groups that doesn't have a side hustle nowadays, and in order to live the life you want to live, those multiple streams of income factor in. And I'm thinking from an educational perspective, how do you all think and focus on entrepreneurship?
And we can just have one person to answer that so we can get more questions. So go ahead, Dr. Ford.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. When we first acknowledge that is an unjust, that's an injustice. So before we even get into the remedy for it, that is fundamentally unjust. That should be criminal. The housing increased 47% during the 3 years of COVID. That's not sustainable. With that being said, I think that always allowing young people and teaching them early on what our community has always known, before it was called the side hustle, how to have multiple streams is important. Just learning how to keep your paper straight, make sure you pay the tax man, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you get your corporation. It's stuff that should be part of the curriculum, but not in the absence of acknowledging that there is a fundamentally unjust distribution of wealth in the country. I think those two things have to coexist.
Question?
Yes, I have a question. Okay. All right.
I
I got in a fight with you just now about that mic. So my question will be focusing on, I heard you guys talk about hiring tutors to go into the schools. We heard you guys mention about how culturally families are not only just financially, but emotionally and not even educationally equipped to inspire their kids, to motivate their kids, to push their kids to not only seek a HBCU, let's just say a community college, period. I am the founder of Step Up to Leadership, which is a social and personal development program here in Charlotte, and we've been established for 10 years. And a lot of our focus is on young men who don't get that opportunity, who don't have that support, nor have that wraparound support. So our biggest struggle, and I'll make sure I wrote my question down, our biggest struggle have been schools, CMS schools, preferably, not able to use the dollars to invest in programs like Step Up to Leadership, who is focusing on young kids who don't have that support, the ones who aren't tardy or absent in school, or those who are not attentive or paying attention, those who are not thriving educationally. So my question is, why aren't schools, CMS schools, investing into programs like Step Up to Leadership, which can improve students' attitude, attendance, focus, while addressing the teachers' burnouts? Because we talked about the absence of teachers leaving, teachers who've been in education 20-something plus years, throwing in a towel. And I don't think it's about financial or they're not getting paid. I think it's because of the young kids that's coming to the schools, and teachers have to be counselors, moms, therapists, and everything. They're not getting paid enough.
Anybody?
I won't speak for CMS, but I think the issue you're touching on is collaboration. And so how do we get our community organizations, our county, city, the school district working together on behalf of our young people? Because I think there's a lot of work that happens in silos. There's a lot of maybe distrust amongst institutions and organizations. And ultimately, our young people are the ones who struggle from that at the end of the day, right? So yeah, at CMS, if I don't have enough teachers, I definitely don't have enough mentors, right? So it would make sense to partner with an organization that provides mentoring to young men. I think some of that is a mindset shift in how organizations and institutions work with each other, and how do we figure out a way to best collaborate so that resources actually impact our students in the way they should.
Hello, I'm Antia Dawkins. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. And my question is, does economic and educational empowerment affect classism? And how do we get rid of classism?
Yes and yes. So, I don't know why I keep thinking about this, but I keep thinking, wealth is typically generated by manufacturing, in the manufacturing sector. We, as from an economic perspective, as an entrepreneur, we tend to go into things that are what is the lowest barrier to entry? So we go into service. That is the reason we lost 40% of African American businesses went away as a result of COVID. Do y'all hear me? 40%. And that's because we were service-related industries, right? So, I think from when we start talking to students and start talking to our communities about what are we talking about generating wealth, right? I don't want to crush anybody's dreams about becoming a record producer, but I want to be realistic and tell them, like, well, here's the path to wealth generation, right? The other thing I will say in terms of the classism, I have a struggle at the Urban League, okay, with classism. I mean, in terms of getting folks, I've got community-based organizations that assume we're bougie, and then I've got bougie folk I'm trying to get home to, right? So we do struggle with that. That is a too auntie. That is really a kitchen table talk, which I think also mirrors when you talked about the mistrust among organizations. I will tell you, the Urban League will not compete with any Black organizations anymore. And what I mean by that is that we will not do any more, we don't do college, what are the college fairs anymore. So there's enough organizations, we will not do health fairs anymore. There's enough organizations doing health fairs. That's not where we should be standing. We should be standing in the gap for organizations that can, or be responsible, and I hold us accountable for that, bringing together the organizations that are doing the work, to say, why are we all talking to each other? What's our agenda? So I will hold us accountable for that.
Last question.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Malay Simmons. I am a graduating senior here at Johnson C. Smith University.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My main question is, I know you say you work for the Urban League, and I see CYC is here. Here at JCSU, we have a program called Biddle Institute, and it needs a lot of attention when it comes down to student advocating. And I'm one of the students that came in from Durham, North Carolina, came from a high school called Hillside High School, and my GPA wasn't the highest, and I had a lot of individuals that were like me that weren't really privileged to have, you know, a lot of college acceptances, and so Smith brought me in from there. And the program doesn't have a lot of funding. It doesn't have a lot of resources, and a lot of students that come in through that program rarely get their foot in the door at other colleges. So I feel like it's very important and imperative that we have programs like the Urban League and CYC partner with Biddle Institute to help these students come in and thrive. Especially during COVID was a big catastrophe for all of our HBCUs. I was one of the students that were affected and had to leave this institution for 2 years. And I got myself back here to graduate. But when I reflect back, I know that I got here because that was the first step, was Biddle Institute. And so I would like to see more programs like the Urban League, CYC, pour into the freshmen that finally get here, and so they can grow exponentially, and hopefully that could be something that y'all can do here, so we can see more success and graduation retention, things that we need to see here at our HBCU from our students to impact the world. Thank you.
Does anybody want to address that? And what does it take to get you guys to partner with JCSU and other schools in order to take students from point A to point B?
Dr. Kellogg said, do it. That's all it takes. She said, do this here, and we're going to do it. So that's it.
What did you
So
say?
do it. I've been saying that since I got here, and you did step up. I love the question, and we gotta do this. Yeah.
But I think it's worth really acknowledging what you just talked about with Biddle, because Biddle, I think it upholds what HBCUs have done, right? Like, and we maintained it. Like, this is a pathway to education in a way that a lot of institutions wouldn't allow. And you are a testament to, right, that program and what it can do and be. So I just wanted to put that out there.
This is good, this is good.
Yeah.
And yeah, one question, all right, you're the extra, you get the extra.
Be loud. I can be loud.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I touch on the last question?
Go ahead.
Last one first. I think too where that plays in a little, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Our organization focuses on college attainment. We're here at a university, obviously, but there are lots of pathways to economic mobility for our young people that do not require a traditional four-year degree or college. Trade programs, apprenticeship programs. And I think as adults, we have a responsibility to make sure they know their full range of options. It doesn't have to be all trade. It doesn't have to be all college or nothing. I think we need to be educated on those options, and young people should know what's the best fit path for them.
You have a quick comment,
Just a quick comment. I'm Dr. Cheryl, JCSU professor of psychology, and I wanted to comment on your comment. I thought it was excellent. And I'd like to say, I was glad to hear that some of us are going to be going into CMS to help with tutoring. Why not let it be the Biddle students and other students, and we build a platform for those students and lift them up and have them lift up our CMS students. Thank you.
Mama said, closed mouths don't get what? Yeah, so we're making stuff happen. So this has been a rich conversation. I want to end on a good note. Thank you, Pat. Let's give it up for our panelists. As we close, I want to go down so everybody can have a closing remark. In your closing remarks, can you address what next? And tell all the people who are here, students, faculty, what do they need to do when they leave these doors in order to improve educational and economic empowerment? What is the lesson? What is the assignment? What do we need to do? Give us words of encouragement so we can walk out these doors empowered and feel that we can do something, that there is still hope. Okay, we'll start with Dr. Ford and go down.
All right, very quickly, education is on the ballot. Education is on the ballot. You got a presidential race, which I won't get into that, but a gubernatorial race where you have someone who clearly has the right vision, and somebody who looks like us but doesn't advocate for our issues. You also have a state superintendent's race that you need to pay attention to. Second most powerful education individual in the state of North Carolina, and a host of other legislative races. Please pay attention, it's on the ballot. So your job, at leaving here, if you're of voting age, is to make sure you vote in alignment with your values.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to, before I leave, figure out who I need to speak to at Little to get that, oh, there you go, all right there. So we can make that happen, so before I leave here, let's match calendars and let's do what we do and get that going. So that'll be a done thing. The second thing is, I will ask if we could spend some time talking about what are the organizations that we can bring together to support what's happening with college and kids that are not going to college. So before you leave, we can get some time on the calendar. And the second thing is I wanted to make everyone aware that we just, the Urban League just opened up a portal where you can go on and get free Microsoft, I forget what the other class is, but the other class is Agile. I need y'all to go on and take those Agile courses. Because there are students that are, you get Agile, you can go into $60,000 a year job. We also have other programs aside from college, to your point, that we are taking kids through, not just kids, but we're taking adults through. And they're coming out, we're about to graduate the largest class ever in the history of Urban League in May. 101 students between they're taking HVAC, electrical, CNA, and some other courses, and they're going to do that. We're going to be working with them on job placement. I tell people all the time, my plumber makes more money than I do.
There are so many negative narratives about our young people and our students. I don't even watch the news anymore, frankly. I think a lot of them have lost hope and have lost direction for the future. And to me, one of the remedies of that is having caring adults and mentors in their lives. I may be preaching to the choir in this audience, but I think however you can get involved in a young person's life, whether that's joining a mentoring organization at your church, wherever you reside, belong in your community, I think make it a point to be a part of a young person's life and let them know that you care and be consistent and be a force in their life. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna add one more. I followed Dr. Ford on Twitter. If you're on Twitter or X, don't do that. He is a great follow. You'll get the real. So I definitely recommend following him.
I'm following you. I would expand on what you just said and say we talked about the complexities of this, right? Black economic and educational opportunities. And so what I will say is, and I tell my students this all the time, is identify what it is that you're interested in changing and change your immediate space. Like, this thing can be daunting. You can waste time trying to figure out, how do I get involved? And I say, don't wait for that. Identify something in your immediate space and change your circle. That's where you start, right? And so if we all do that, think about how our circles will begin to connect and touch each other. And so that's what I say to you.
Let's give our panelists a round of applause. I hope you got something out of this conversation. It was rich. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Brayboy.
Well, this was a rich conversation. It's very rare, I think, in this day and age that you get this collection of people together with such thoughtful commentary on the issues of the day. So I want to give the panel another round of applause. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Melvin Herring because he was instrumental in making this panel happen today. And another thank you to Chair Boyd and President Ken Locke. Joy Page Springs for making this possible, as well as my staff, Gabby, Allison, and Doug, my colleagues here for their hard work. This is Inauguration Week, and this is just the beginning. And so I hope everyone will come out tomorrow for inauguration of our 15th president, Dr. Valerie Kinlock. The bus schedules are out, so check your mail beginning at 7 a.m. Most of you will board the shuttles between 8:30 and 9. Make sure you come dressed appropriately and come ready to celebrate. All right, thank you once again.